Love. Under the scope.
Welcome back to Love Under the Scope. I am so excited to have you here. This is a podcast where we will cover all of the topics related to long-term relationships. We will touch on the beautiful stuff, the fun stuff, and we will touch on the not so fun stuff, the scary stuff, all of the ups and downs that we will experience in a long-term romantic relationship. It's nice to think that it could all be rainbows and butterflies, but the fact is it's just not. We have our ups, we have our downs. And in this show, my intention is to really explore kind of the nuances and the stuff that people maybe don't want to talk about as much. Maybe it could be taboo. That's what I want to uncover and discuss here on this show. My name is Kelby Lauren. I am a certified self-love and relationship coach. So I was certified through the Vita methodology. I help my clients not only with their relationships, their romantic relationships, but also with their relationships with themselves. I help people build self-compassion, build self-empowerment, because I have done a lot of this work myself. I'm not done with that work. I have still a lot that I'd like to do, but I have completed a lot of this inner work, so I like to help others and use what I've learned in my work. I also am in a relationship now, in a great relationship with my partner of almost 7 years now, and we've had a roller coaster of experiences together. Love him so much, so supportive to me. And yeah, we've experienced all of those ups and downs that I mentioned earlier. We have been through quite a few of them. Times where I questioned my sanity. I was brought to my knees by this relationship. Not his fault, just stuff that happens, right? And so that is my intention with the show, is to shed light on these things, share personal experiences, times where I felt alone and broken, and where it would have been really nice to have heard stories from other people. I find that very healing when people can share in vulnerability what they've gone through, and so I don't feel as alone. So that's my intention with this show. I also want to address this idea that relationships should be perfect. Everything we see on social media makes us believe that relationships are just always perfect and wonderful and, relationship goals and whatnot. So I think that's kind of detrimental to really strong relationships and to learning how to be in a strong relationship, because it takes facing some shit, right? It's not always going to be wonderful and amazing. It takes being uncomfortable sometimes to grow. We know that from going to the gym. It takes a little bit of pain, a little bit of discomfort to experience those strong muscles, right? My disclaimer before we get into the topic for today is that I will be talking about loving relationships where there is a foundation of support and love. I'm not talking about relationships where abuse is present, whether it's physical, emotional, mental, any kind of abuse. I'm not really talking about those kind of relationships. Of course, that's a whole conversation within itself. What does abuse look like, right? There's obviously a spectrum, but I'm on the side of the spectrum of love and commitment, right? We're committed to each other for the most part. We have that foundation. That's the kind of relationship that I'm talking about in this podcast. So the topic for today is a fun one. It's been a tough one for me in my relationship to understand this topic. What it is the idea that in a great relationship, there will be some sort of conflict at some point. Now, I want to preface this whole conversation by saying, I'm not talking about fighting every day. I'm not talking about, again, abuse. I'm talking about those normal, somewhat frequent arguments and even explosive arguments that turn into fights. That's what I'm talking about. When we're communicating or we go through a situation and we end up on different pages and it's really difficult to get back on that same page. And we may play out these patterns of disconnect, of frustration, of anger, or whatever it is. We might play that pattern out over and over again. You always do this. You always react this way. This always happens, right? That's what I'm talking about. So we're going to get into it. I'm really excited for this topic. So without further ado, I'm going to start at the very beginning of why we experience conflict, even in really great relationships. Actually, especially in great relationships. It goes all the way back to our childhood. So when we are born, we're going way back, all the way to the beginning. When we are born, and throughout our childhood into our teen years, this entire time, we are being conditioned. We are being conditioned to believe certain things about love, about the world, about just how everything works, relationships, everything. We are like a sponge taking in information about how the world works. That doesn't mean that all conditioning is bad. I want to say this up front. Conditioning it's just the circumstances in which we are raised. Think of it like if a flower grows in a forest, the conditions that it's growing within are going to affect the way the flower grows. The flower will adapt based on the conditions that it is growing in. So not all conditioning is bad. In fact, it can instill in us what we believe to be true or false, what we believe to be right or wrong. These can be good things for our childhood as far as structure goes. Conditioning can also be detrimental. We take all of these messages from our parents, from our siblings, from our friends, from the media, from society, from religion. That's a big one. And we ingrain them into our very being. We turn to these figures, our parents, all of the figures that I just mentioned, to understand what love is. What does love feel like? How is love given? How is love received? How is love expressed? We take all of these messages and we internalize them into our system, into our subconscious mind. So all of the ways that our parents adore us, celebrate us, cheer us on, love us, that's internalized. And the ways that we are heartbroken by our parents, the ways that we are disappointed and experience pain from our parents, whether they meant to or not. Heartbreak, it's sort of inevitable with any childhood, even if your parents are so loving and so there for you, right? Nobody is perfect. No parent is perfect. There's no guidebook on how to be the perfect mother. So heartbreak is sort of inevitable on some level for some of us more than others, right? Some of us have experienced a lot of heartbreak around the relationship with our parents. Even the most minor mistakes too could lead to heartbreak inevitably. Attachment theory kind of touches on this idea of how we relate to our parents as children coming with us into our adulthood relationships. If you're listening right now, I feel like you probably have heard of attachment theory. I'm not going to get into it today, but it's certainly relevant to this entire conversation. Something that attachment theory touches on that I am going to expand on here is this idea that we learn how to cope when we are upset or triggered or angry. We learn how to deal with that as a child. We come up with the best way to navigate stress, to avoid pain based on our specific circumstances at a very young age. And we can be quite crafty as children. We will really get creative with our ways of dealing with stress and what the best way is to completely avoid stress, even if it doesn't really make logical sense. We're talking about a child, although they can be quite crafty, logically, maybe wouldn't be the best way to cope when viewed from an adult perspective. So things like lying to avoid punishment, running away and locking yourself in the bedroom, throwing a tantrum. I've seen plenty of adults throw a tantrum in public sometimes too, right? Going completely silent, going mute. These are all sort of these childhood ways of dealing with stress that could be carried into adulthood. Think about the ways as a child that you dealt with stress. Were you like me, and did you go and run to your bedroom and try to deal with your emotions on your own? If you were like me and you did deal that way, maybe you could see how that wouldn't translate well into adulthood. I had to do work around the fact that I will run to my bedroom, I will run to my car, I will run to a coffee shop in order to get away from a stressful situation. I also didn't really learn how to express my emotions to people and to experience my emotions with other people's support. And so I had to learn that skill as I got older. In order to be in a functioning romantic relationship, you do have to understand how to express your emotions. So our conditioning goes far beyond love and triggers, though. Conditioning shapes the way that we see the world as a whole. Every single perception that we have comes from our conditioning, as long as we're not doing work around it. This is how the world works because that's what my mom said. That's what my dad said. That's what my doctor said. That's what my teacher said. That's what society said. All of these messages that we're getting about this is the way the world works, and there is no other way. How could there possibly be? And so we kind of get funneled into these belief systems. So we take everything that we've learned and we funnel it into our very perception of the world. The fun part comes in when we start to question and reflect on our beliefs that we've collected, maybe subconsciously collected throughout our entire life. And that will come into play later in this episode. For now, we're going to move into conditioning in the context of dating. That conditioning that we just covered from childhood into our teen years follows us into our dating world. So when we start to date, when we are looking for a potential mate, we take all of these things that we've been conditioned to believe and we transfer them into our search for a partner. In this section, I'm going to talk a lot from the point of view in the book, Getting the Love You Want by Harville Hendrix. It's a great guide for anybody who is navigating the topic for today's episode. Anybody who is confused on it, get this book. It's not only informational, but it actually gives you practices to use in your daily life with your partner. So in this book, Harville Hendrix talks about the idea of an imago. The imago is this persona, this identity of a fictional person that we create based on an amalgamation of our caregivers, the characteristics of our parents, anybody who had a part in our upbringing. We will smush together all of these characteristics and create this imago. We do that because we deeply crave this mate who matches our understanding of what love is. So that conditioning that we have around what love is, we want to find somebody who fits that idea of love, whether it's conscious or subconscious. In fact, on the subconscious level, the mind cannot differentiate between the love that it received as a childhood from parents, from caregivers, and the love that we are receiving in a romantic relationship. The subconscious mind sees that idea of love as the same thing. That's why we end up wanting to look for a mate that matches these characteristics. So if mom is bubbly and social and also has an explosive temper, and dad is a go-getter, he works hard, and he's actually kind of a workaholic, I may end up looking subconsciously for a partner who is bubbly, social, explosive, works hard, is a go-getter, and has workaholic tendencies. Now, this is a very straightforward kind of simplification of this idea, but that's kind of what I'm getting at. We take the characteristics, whether they are quote unquote good or quote unquote bad, and we smush them all together, and we're kind of wanting a little bit of both. The reason we would look for the negative or the bad qualities is because subconsciously, we are looking to resolve these wounds from our childhood. We want that soothing, we want that healing that we maybe didn't get in our childhood. We want a resolution around that. And therefore, we look for a mate who might help us to tie off those loose ends. When we go on dates with different people, I think of it as like when you're on Tinder and you're swiping left or right, you will flip through these people and you will feel if they match this imago, if they match this persona. Do they love in the same way that I love? Do they have these specific characteristics that I'm looking for? If they don't, there will be no chemistry, according to Hendricks. And I have experienced this. I'm sure some of you guys listening have too. You go on a date, you see this person, on Tinder, they look very attractive. You go out with them. They are not only attractive, but they've got a great job. They are funny. Maybe you kiss and you feel like, oh, they're a great kisser. And then after a couple of dates, a few dates, you're kind of like, oh, there's actually nothing here. And you have to let them know, hey, you're great, but I just don't feel anything. When we do meet somebody who fits the bill, who is matched up with our imago, we may feel this feeling of connection, of maybe knowing the person longer than we actually have, of familiarity, comfort, because it's like two puzzle pieces finding each other. Presumably, not only do they fit your imago, but you also fit theirs. So in that way, this first stage of connecting with that person who fits the bill, who matches your imago, is really quite beautiful. It's like two lost souls meeting. And so we have the next phase of this process of meeting somebody and our conditioning coming together. So the next phase would be you have decided to be exclusive with this person and now you are in the honeymoon stage. And everything is wonderful. Life is amazing. All of my problems are gone. You have this person on this pedestal. They can do no wrong. They're going to solve all of my problems, right? I'm hyperbolizing, but it's kind of like everything is just splendid. Not one issue. I am saved from my suffering, basically. And so that in itself is kind of an activation of our inner child. Our inner child is like, oh, somebody's going to save me. Oh, I never have to worry again. Unfortunately, though, this cannot last forever. Maybe we can always have that wonder and awe around our partner. But this idea of the honeymoon phase where we're also being flooded with these hormones of, bliss, it just can't last forever. It's not meant to. We wouldn't want it to. We want reality, right? And so that's the next stage is reality. Record scratcher. Reality comes in and kicks down the door and says, hey, all of those things that you thought about your partner, that they're like perfect and they're never going to hurt you and they're just made in your ideal image. Yeah, it's not true. They're actually just another human being with flaws and problems. They have their own shit, just like you brought your shit into the relationship. Yeah, they brought theirs too. So yeah, awkward. Think about the first 6 months to a year, it could even be 2 years, that you were in that honeymoon phase with this person. It's exciting because you don't really know them all that well yet, right? You're still getting to know each other. Everything is great and wonderful. After the honeymoon phase has passed, that's when we might start to see a little bit more tension. Maybe we start to have some arguments. We're kind of navigating this new territory of, okay, you're no longer on this pedestal. You're just another human being. And now we got to figure this shit out. In fact, I will share that I had a handful of arguments with my partner when we left the honeymoon phase. And it can be disorienting because we don't know whether it's a sign of, are we not a match? Are we supposed to break up? Or we can just feel so confused. and unsure about how to proceed. These arguments that I had with my fiance, they were difficult to navigate. I remember one in particular right now that was especially difficult. And here is the secret in these arguments that happen not only at the start of coming out of the honeymoon phase, but throughout. The arguments where we are so heartbroken deep, deep down and we feel shattered, they come from our childhood wounds. Those are the deepest heartbreaks that we experience in a romantic relationship are tied to our childhood wounds. So if you are hurt in a similar way from the argument with your partner to the, relationship you had with your parents, is going to hurt. It reminds us of the beliefs that we might carry around not being lovable, not being good enough, not being important. So going back to what I said about how we pick each other based on this imago, the qualities of our caregivers, not only the good, but also the bad, because we choose them based on that, they will push our buttons in just the right way. And I will push their buttons in just the right way. It's a two-way road. This is not about placing blame on anybody. When we start to build intimacy and we start to get closer and closer and we start to come together, buttons are going to be pushed. It's inevitable. I'll give you an example of this. This is a personal example. My classic way of dealing with conflict is to run away, to run far away, get the hell away from whatever is causing me stress or intensity or pain. I am a total flight person. I am an avoidant attachment person. So when I feel too intense or like somebody is harshing my vibe or I'm in an argument, I want to fucking run. My partner is not a runner. He is a let's talk about this now kind of person. I don't know his attachment style, but I will say he prefers to talk now. And so for me, if I'm activated, I can feel like, oh, that's crouching in on me. That's harshing my vibe. You're like coming in on me. And I don't like that. In reality, he just wants to have a conversation. But for me, it's being perceived as you're coming at me. So I want to run even more. And for him, me running means, oh, you're leaving. You're leaving the conversation. You're leaving me. So can you see how that dynamic of I'm leaving, you're coming in at me, which makes me want to leave even more, which frustrates you even more. Can you see how that would be frustrating in a relationship? It's like this twisted dance that we're doing with each other. I think of two magnets that are repelling each other, and every time one gets closer, the other one pulls away. It's really frustrating to be in a dynamic like that. That was my example, my personal example. There are so many different dynamics. You might have your own dance. There are so many different dynamics that we take on when we enter into a relationship, and that is just one of them. And I share that just as an example of these patterns that we can go through over and over again based on our conditioning. If we do not address these dynamics, if we just let them go on and on and on, resentment can start to build up. And that is so unfortunate because in most cases, both parties love each other. Both parties want resolution. If they're those two magnets, they want to come back together and be attracted to each other. It's just not possible when we're stuck deep into this dynamic. So how do we stop repelling each other and come back together? That is the next phase. We've gone through the honeymoon phase with our belief systems. We've made it out the other end. We're maybe getting into these arguments. We don't know what the hell is going on. Why does it not feel beautiful and amazing all the time anymore like it did before? And now we're on to the next phase. This next phase is where we choose to face our belief systems. Why would we do that? Because I'm going to tell you right now, it's not always fun to face your own shit, is what I like to call it, our shit. Why would we do that? Well, we would do that because it helps us to build a foundation of love and trust in a relationship. And I'll explain that further. Let's assume that you find the dynamics of your relationship, particularly around tension and stress. Let's assume that you find that frustrating. I want you to think about what do you desire your relationship to look and feel like? Do you want to feel more connection? Do you want more support from your partner? What do you desire for the relationship in the long run? Get specific. I want to feel special. I want to feel seen. I want to feel loved. I want to feel warmth in my relationship. When you start to take these baby steps of looking at your desire, looking at what you want, you don't necessarily even have to involve your partner yet. You can do this kind of on your own. Sometimes when we step up to the plate, it's almost like an unspoken invitation to our partner to meet us there. I've seen this in my own relationship where I don't really necessarily say anything, and yet a shift still occurs. That's not all issues. Some things need to be spoken about explicitly. But there are other times where we can kind of do things on our own and see what happens. So once we establish what we want, that's when we start to, and you don't have to do it in this order necessarily. This is just my recommendation. So you can do this in whatever order you want, but there is a step where you start to take inventory of your own shit. So you start to look and really look, okay, at your belief systems. What triggers you? How do you deal with your triggers? You could think back to what I said about running away, throwing a tantrum. Think of the ways that kids deal with their stress. A lot of the time, it may line up with how you deal with your stress today. How you dealt with it as a child could be paralleled with how you deal with it today. What did you learn about love? Did you learn that love is painful? Did you learn that love is unfair or has to be earned? Did you learn that you do not deserve love? What did you learn about love from your parents, from your family, from society, religion? What about your childhood upbringing is reflected in your partner? Not just the bad, but the good. So what about your caregivers is reflected in how your partner is, especially the good stuff, actually, because it's a really beautiful thing to find somebody who helps you feel at home as far as the ways that you received love. No matter what you do in terms of addressing your belief systems and busting through these frustrating dynamics, one of the most important parts, if not the most important part, is owning your shit. I said before, it's not easy. It can be easy sometimes. It's generally not. It's generally not, because we really have to put the ego aside and go, okay, realistically, what am I bringing to the table as far as conditioning that could be detrimental to the way that my partner and I move through stress? And we have to be realistic. That doesn't mean we have to take ownership for shit that is not ours, by the way. This isn't about taking on responsibility for everything that occurs in a dynamic. Okay, I want to remind you there's two people to tango, two people in a relationship. Each one brings their shit to the table. The issue is, can you own yours? If I brought this stuff and you brought that, can we look at what's on the table and say, yeah, I'll admit this part of it is mine. When you're doing this kind of ownership and taking inventory, it could be triggering in itself. So what triggers me? Well, what triggers me is asking myself, what the fuck triggers me? I mean, it could bring up emotions from childhood that maybe you haven't even felt since you were little. And you will know. I have gone through meditations where I'm working with this, and I'm like rocked by emotions that I haven't felt since I was 8, 10, 15. It helps to have external assistance when you do this. So somebody like me who is a coach, it could be a therapist, somebody who can help to guide you through this unraveling, this unfolding of reflection, somebody who can help you to build self-compassion as you do this reflection, because you do want to be able to hold yourself with some kind of compassion. We're not trying to feel forced through this process to rip the Band-Aid off and get it over with. This is something we want to do slowly with care and allowing whatever wants to come forward to do so with compassion. We don't want to overwhelm the system. We don't want to feel like, oh, I'm not doing enough. But we do want to make sure that we are establishing a practice of looking at our own shit. It's a funny statement to make. Well, think of it this way, though. Shit is what allows soil to be fertile and create life, right? So we can use shit to create a beautiful flower. And that is the same for our conditioning, our belief systems, our shit. We can reflect on it, move through it, and come out on the other side having gotten closer to the type of relationship that we want with our partner and ourselves. Doing this self-reflection, inventory, and ownership of our own shit. This is what creates trust, love, compassion, warmth in any relationship, specifically romantic, but any relationship. It's the trust of you are going to take accountability for your shit, and I'm going to take accountability for mine. And I won't be blamed for what is yours. That ownership, that accountability, that is what creates trust. And the idea that taking accountability for our emotions, it's so empowering to ourselves too. Think about it. No longer do I have to rely on some external person to inform my emotions. I don't turn to you and say, how should I feel right now? Should I feel sad? Oh, you made me feel sad. You made me feel angry. When you can take accountability and ownership, it's so empowering. It's the deepest form of empowerment to be able to own your own emotions and not spray them all over other people. And now we'll move into the next and final stage as far as this conversation goes. And I will call this stage coming back together in trust. So now we've understood that our belief systems come from our childhood. We bring them into our dating life. We use them to meet our ideal mate. We move through the honeymoon phase of everything is wonderful and amazing. We come out of the honeymoon phase with that rude awakening of reality. We then start to take stock of our own shit, our own belief systems, what we're bringing to the table. And now we're bringing it all together and we're coming back together in trust. Once you've taken inventory of your own shit and you've really reflected internally and given this some thought, some meditation, we're going to want to then hear from our partner about their shit. And we are going to want to hear their own inventory of belief systems. So, of course, they would have to agree to go on this journey with you. But this is really important if you're wanting to create deeper connection and emotional bonding. So the same questions that you asked yourself, or similar questions, your partner will ask themselves. And they may want some time to do this on their own before you start talking about it together, to sort out their thoughts, right? And make sense of what the hell happened. But yeah, we're wanting to hear the answers to those same questions from our partner. And we're not wanting to be accusatory on either side. We're not wanting one partner to be flinging insults at the other while the other is just sitting there taking it. That's not the point of this. The point of this is to exchange and to hear your partner out on what they have experienced and what they feel in this dynamic. I would make sure to do this in an appropriate setting. So we're not driving, we're not distracted by something else, but we're very intentionally sitting together and exchanging this information. Doing this gives us kind of an understanding and maybe even some level of compassion for why our partner is doing the things they do. Doesn't mean that it's an excuse, doesn't mean that suddenly it's okay for them to act that way all the time, but it's really helpful to just build some level of compassion. I see. That's why you run every time we get into an argument, because you feel like you have to avoid being punished or being hurt or some variation of that. You feel you cannot rely on other people to support you during those times, and this is why you run. Again, doesn't mean that I'm going to continue running and now you just have to be okay with it because I told you where it comes from. No, it's just the awareness of the root of this problem. It really helps to understand that on each sides of the relationship. We're opening up these channels of communication to this practice in itself, and you can look to Getting the Love You Want, the book I mentioned earlier. He maps out how to do this kind of exchange. But this is just us talking, getting the communication stirred up so that we can really take a look at what's going on. You may want, again, the assistance of an outside guide or a therapist or a coach. I personally like this format of sharing. It's from Brene Brown. She talks about her and her husband using this line of, when this thing happened, this is the story I told myself. So when you got upset and you left the apartment during our argument, the story I told myself is that you don't care about me and you don't think I'm worth sticking around for. Some variation of that could be supportive when you have this conversation. There are a lot of communication tools that you can implement here, using I statements, using feeling statements, right? We definitely don't want to come at it like, you always are this and you always do that and you make me feel this. We really want to avoid that because we want to foster this vulnerability. So the vulnerability of having this conversation, it can be difficult because you're going to have to open up in a way that maybe you haven't before to your partner. But the vulnerability is what builds trust. Vulnerability and trust are funny things because they go hand in hand. You can't really have vulnerability without having trust. I can trust you in being vulnerable this way, and vice versa. I trust you because you allow me to be vulnerable. Ideally, before you go into any of this work, you do have a foundation of trust built into the relationship. I would hope that for you, right? If you don't, then you might want to take a step back and evaluate, well, what's going on there? Why don't you trust this person? What about the relationship makes it not trustworthy? Or is it something within yourself that you're not able to trust because of something you experienced? We definitely want to address that piece earlier on in this process. So we really want vulnerability, specifically around our emotions, what I'm feeling. What do I feel when I get triggered? We want to be able to communicate that in a way that is safe and emotionally safe, not physically safe. I mean, yes, physically safe, but I'm talking about nervous system safety. We want to be able to express how we're feeling and recognize, communicate our emotions to our partner. That's really important for clarity, for connection, for communication with our partner. This whole idea of vulnerability and trust, it's like this really beautiful weaving back and forth that, at least that's how I see it, where we are willing to be vulnerable and that builds trust. The more trust we build, the more we're willing to be vulnerable. And it just goes back and forth like that. And we get this really beautiful pattern of vulnerability and trust. Another element of this process is being able to hold yourself and your partner in compassion. Now, that's not something that we just go to sleep. We wake up one morning and we're compassionate all of a sudden. This is something that takes effort and time. There are practices and meditations we can do with possibly the guidance of a coach or a therapist in order to address what's keeping us from being compassionate toward ourselves. A lot of the time, there's just these obstacles in the way of self-hatred and insecurity that are blocking us from our own compassion. We all have compassion in us, in the body, in our system. It's just a matter of accessing it. So when you go in to work on this self-compassion, you're doing kind of what we talked about in today's episode of addressing your belief systems, addressing and acknowledging what you have gone through, making sense of what you've experienced, and pulling apart very slowly your story to understand how it's being stored in your nervous system, in your body, in your psyche, in ways that are blocking you from self-love, from self-compassion today. Compassion for me, I will speak from my personal experience, is probably the most important element of my self-improvement and inner work has been having self-compassion so that I can move through each step with patience, with grace, with some level of emotional expression as we move through the process. It's really helpful to be able to hold yourself through the entire process. And it helps to have a supportive partner. So I'm really grateful for that. That's been fundamental in my growth, has been having a supportive partner who cheers me on. He's just the best. So that is kind of a snapshot of why friction, tension, and conflict will occur in a great relationship. It's built in. It's kind of an inevitable quality of a great relationship. It's kind of like how a rock gets turned into a diamond under pressure. We go through this discomfort in order to experience transformation, and it's not always pretty. Think of a butterfly. They turn into goo before they come out and spread their wings. So think of the times that you have felt gooey and weird and uncomfortable and downright fucking scared in your relationship. And just know, for the most part, those times, they're leading you to transformation, to face your own shit, to be with your own shit, your own self, so that you can move forward. You deserve that. You deserve to move forward. And nobody can do that for you. Only you can. Only you can take ownership of what you have brought to the table. And that is not me blaming you. You shouldn't have experienced the things that you did. But the reality is these things happen, right? So can we go in with bravery, with compassion, and start to let our story, our conditioning unfold in front of us? And then we get to decide, oh, I like that. I like that belief. I'm going to keep that one. This one, I don't know about this one. This one is fucking me up right now. We have the freedom to choose what we want to keep in our garden, our belief system garden. We get to choose what grows and what gets snipped. So a reminder that the next time you have an argument or a miscommunication with your partner, you are not broken. You are not alone. You are not meant to be alone. And it's likely that you are a good match. This is life bringing you to the plate and asking you, do you want to play? Let's go. So doing the inner work and the self-reflection in order to experience this transformation is so exciting and so frustrating and so worth it. Oh my God, I would do it 1,000 times, really. It's probably the most fulfilling experience in this human life, is to enter into a relationship with another human being, a whole ass human being with all of their shit, their trauma, their belief systems, their experiences, and to come together and to slowly make peace possible, to make love possible with this person. And being able to then lift that other person up, lift up the relationship and grow together, become this power couple. This is how you do that. And when we do that, you know who benefits? The entire world. It starts out with us, the relationship, our neighbors, our children, our pets, our family, our coworkers, the neighborhood we live in, the community we live in, the city we live in, the state. I mean, I could go on and on. It just completely ripples outward. So is it worth it to do the difficult work? Yes. Period. Thank you so much for listening today. I had a lot of fun with this one. If you could give me a review on whatever platform you're listening, that would be wonderful. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or iHeartRadio. I'm on I think, most platforms at this point. If you would like to work with me, you can reach out via Instagram DMs. I am at Coached by Kelby. I'm on TikTok at Coached by Kelby. And you can also reach me via email, coachedbykelby@gmail.com, if you would like to work together on any of the things that we have talked about today or my previous episodes. I love supporting other people through this work. It is a huge passion of mine. I'll see you next week.